Jar Jar Binks of the Gungans and Queen Amidala of the Naboo stood together at a window that ran floor to ceiling in the Queen's chambers, looking out at the gleaming spires of Coruscant. An odd pairing at best. The Queen regal and composed, the Gungan awkward and jittery. They kept company in silence and watched the sunset color the sky a brilliant gold that reflected here and there off the flat metal and glass surfaces of the city in sudden, blinding explosions of light. They had returned from the Republic Senate some hours ago, Jar Jar, Anakin, the Queen, and her handmaidens. They had come back principally because there seemed to be nothing else they could do to change the course of events regarding the future of Naboo. Senator Palpatine stayed behind to politic with his colleagues over the selection of a new Supreme Chancellor, and Captain Panaka had remained with him, asked by the Queen to bring her news when there was any to offer. None had been forthcoming as yet. Now Anakin was gone as well, taken by Qui-Gon to the Jedi Temple where he was to meet with the Council, and no one had seen Padme in some time. So Jar Jar had rattled around in Palpatine's quarters rather like a stray could do until Amidala had taken pity on him and invited him to sit with her. She had gone into seclusion on her return, changing out of her Senate robes into a less imposing gold-trimmed black gown that emphasized how slender and small she really was. She wore an inverted crescent-shaped crown with a beaded golden medallion arched down over her smooth forehead, but even so she stood several centimeters shorter than the Gungan. She was clearly in pain, her eyes so sad and distant that it made Jar Jar want to comfort her. If it had been Annie or Padme, he might have reached over and patted her on the head, but he was not about to try that with the Queen. There were no guards, but her handmaidens, Irte and Rebe, cloaked in their crimson hooded robes and forever watchful, stood in waiting near the door, and he was certain there were guards somewhere close as well. He was careless of many things, oblivious to others, and in general given over to enjoying life in a haphazard way, but he was no fool. Finally, though, he could ignore the situation no longer. He shuffled his feet and cleared his throat, drawing the Queen's attention. She turned, her white painted face with red dots on each cheek, and a red slash in the center of her lower lip, doll-like and expressionless.
Nissa wondered sometimes why the gods invent pain,
he offered sympathetically. Amidala's cool gaze was steady and clear. To motivate us, I imagine.
You said thinking you said people gonna die?
He asked, working his billed mouth around the bitter words as if he could taste them. The Queen considered the question and shook her head slowly. I don't know, Jar Jar.
Gungan's gonna get past it too, eh?
I hope not. Jar Jar straightened, and a fierce pride brightened his eyes.
Gungan's no dying without a fight. We're warriors. We got a grand army.
An army? She repeated, a hint of surprise in her soft voice.
A grand old army, lot of Gungans. These come from all over. That's why no swamp beings give us trouble. Too many Gungans. Got in big energy shields too. Nothing get through. Got the energy balls, fly out of slings and splat electricity and goo. Bomb bad stuff. Gungans no ever give up to Machinex or anyone.
He paused, shrugged uncomfortably.
That's why Naboo no like us, maybe.
She was studying him closely now, her detached gaze replaced by something more intense, as if she were turning an unexpected thought over in her mind. She was preparing to speak to that thought, he believed, when Senator Palpatine and Captain Panaka strode through the doorway in a rush. Your Highness, Captain Panaka greeted, barely able to contain his excitement, as both men bowed quickly and straightened. Senator Palpatine has been nominated to succeed Valorum as Supreme Chancellor. Palpatine's smile was contained and deferential, and his voice carefully modulated as he spoke. A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one. I promise, Your Majesty, if I am elected, I will restore democracy to the Republic. I will put an end to the corruption that has plagued the Senate. The Trade Federation will lose its influence over the bureaucrats, and our people will be freed from the tyranny of this unlawful and onerous invasion. Who else has been nominated? Amidala asked abruptly, cutting him short. Bail Antilles of Alderaan and Ox Mo of Malastare, Panaka told her, avoiding Palpatine's eyes. The senator was quick to recover from the unexpected interruption of his speech. Your Majesty, I feel confident that our situation will generate strong support for us when the voting takes place tomorrow. He paused meaningfully. I will be Chancellor, I promise you. The Queen did not look impressed. She moved past Jar Jar to the window and stared out at the lights of the city as they brightened with the fading of the sunset. I fear by the time you have taken control of the bureaucrats, Senator, there will be nothing left of our cities, our people, or our way of life to salvage. Palpatine looked taken aback. I understand your concern, Your Majesty. Unfortunately, the Federation has seized possession of our planet. It would be nearly impossible to immediately dislodge them. Perhaps. Amidala turned from the window to face him. Her eyes were bright with anger and determination. With the Senate in transition, there is nothing more I can do here. She walked to where he stood with Panaka. Senator, this is your arena. I must return now to mine. I have decided to go back to Naboo. My place is with my people. Go back? Palpatine was aghast, his pale face stricken. Panaka looked quickly from one to the other. But, Your Majesty, be realistic. You will be in great danger. They will force you to sign the treaty. The Queen was calm and composed. I will sign no treaty. My fate will be no different from that of my people. She turned to Panaka. Captain. Panaka snapped to attention. Yes, Your Highness? Ready my ship. Palpatine stepped forward quickly to intercept her. Please, Your Majesty, stay here where it's safe. Amidala's voice was edged with iron. No place is safe if the Senate doesn't condemn this invasion. It is clear to me now that the Republic no longer functions. Her eyes locked on his. If you win the election, Senator, I know you will do everything possible to stop the Federation. I pray you will find a way to restore sanity and compassion to the Republic. She moved past him in a smooth, gliding motion and was out the door, her handmaidens and Panaka at her heels. Jar Jar Binks followed, shuffling after as unobtrusively as he could manage, glancing just once at Palpatine in passing. He was surprised to catch the barest glimpse of a smile on the senator's shrewd face. In the Temple of the Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker stood before the Council of 12. Clustered together at the center of the speaker's platform, they faced the circle of chairs in which the members of the council were seated and awaited their decision on the boy. Outside, the light was pale and wan as twilight replaced sunset, and night began its slow descent across the city.
Finished we are, with our examination of the boy,
Yoda advised in his guttural, whispery voice. His eyes were lidded and sleepy, his pointed ears pricked forward.
Correct, you were, Qui-Gon.
Mace Windu nodded his concurrence, his dark, smooth face expressionless in the dim light. His cells contain a very high concentration of midichlorians. There was an emphasis on the word very as he spoke. The force is strong in him, Ki-Adi-Mundi agreed. Qui-Gon felt a rush of satisfaction on hearing the words, a vindication of his insistence on freeing the boy from his life on Tatooine and bringing him here. He is to be trained then, he declared in triumph. There was an uncomfortable silence as the council members looked from one to the other. No, Mace Windu said quietly. He will not be trained. Anakin's face crumpled, and there were tears in his eyes as he glanced quickly at Qui-Gon. No? The Jedi Master repeated in disbelief, shocked, almost speechless. He tried hard to ignore the I told you so look on Obi-Wan's young face. Mace Windu nodded, dark eyes steady. He is too old. There was already too much anger in him. Qui-Gon was incensed, but he held himself in check. This decision made no sense. It could not be allowed to stand. He is the chosen one, he insisted vehemently. You must see it. Yoda cocked his round head contemplatively.
Clouded this boy's future is, masked by his youth.
Qui-Gon searched the faces of the other members of the Jedi Council, but found no help. He straightened and nodded his acceptance of their decision. Very well. I will train him then. I take Anakin Skywalker as my Padawan apprentice. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Obi-Wan stiffen in shock. He saw, as well, the sudden flicker of hope that crossed Anakin's face. He did not respond to either, keeping his gaze directed toward the council.
An apprentice you already have, Qui-Gon,
Yoda pointed out sharply.
Impossible to take on a second.
We forbid it, Mace Windu advised darkly. Obi-Wan is ready, Qui-Gon declared. I am, his protege agreed heatedly, trying unsuccessfully to mask his surprise and disappointment in his mentor's unexpected decision. I am ready to face the trials. Yoda's sleepy eyes shifted.
Ready so early, you are. What know you of ready?
Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan exchanged quick, hard looks, and the measure of their newfound antagonism was palpable. The breach in their relationship was widening so quickly it could no longer be mapped. Qui-Gon took a deep breath and turned back to the council. Obi-Wan is headstrong, and he has much to learn still about the living force, but he is capable. There is little more he will learn from me. Yoda shook his wizened face.
Our own counsel we will keep on who is ready, Qui-Gon. More to learn he has.
Now is not the time for this, Mace Windu stated with finality. The Senate will vote tomorrow for a new Supreme Chancellor. Queen Amidala returns home, we are advised, which will put pressure on the Federation and could widen the confrontation. Those responsible will be quick to act on these new events.
Drawn out of hiding, her attackers will be,
Yoda whispered. Events are moving too fast for distractions such as this, Ki-Adi-Mundi added. Mace Windu took a quick look about at the others sitting on the council, then turned once more to Qui-Gon. Go with the Queen to Naboo and discover the identity of this dark warrior who attacked you, be it Sith or otherwise. That is the clue we need to unravel this mystery. Yoda's nod was slow and brooked no argument.
Decided later, young Skywalker's fate will be.
Qui-Gon took a deep breath, filled with frustration and disappointment at the unexpected turn of events. Anakin would not be trained, even though he had offered to take the boy as his Padawan. Worse, he had offended Obi-Wan, not intentionally perhaps, but deeply nevertheless. The rift was not permanent, but it would take time for the younger man's pride to heal, time they could not afford. He bowed his acquiescence to the council. I brought Anakin here. He must stay in my charge. He has nowhere else to go. Mace Windu nodded. He is your ward, Qui-Gon. We do not dispute that.
But train him not,
Yoda admonished sharply.
Take him with you, but train him not.
The words stung, the force behind them unmistakable. Qui-Gon flinched inwardly, but said nothing. Protect the Queen, Mace Windu added. But do not intercede if it comes to war until we have the Senate's approval. There was a long silence as the members of the council regarded Qui-Gon Jinn gravely. He stood there, trying to think of something more to say, some other argument to offer. Outside, the last of the twilight faded into darkness, and the lights of the city began to blink on like watchful eyes.
May the Force be with you,
Yoda said finally, signaling to the Jedi Master that the audience was over. The Jedi and the boy, Having been made aware of Amidala's imminent departure for Naboo, went directly to the landing platform where the Queen's transport was anchored to await her arrival. The shuttle ride over was marked by a strained silence between the Jedi and a discomfort in the boy he could not dispel. He looked down at his feet most of the time, wishing he could think of a way to stop Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan from being angry at each other. When they disembarked from the shuttle at the landing platform, R2-D2 was already bustling about. The little droid beeped at Anakin cheerfully, then wandered over to the edge of the rampway to look down at the traffic. In doing so, he leaned out too far and tumbled over. Anakin gasped, but a second later the astromech droid reappeared, boosted back onto the rampway by his onboard jets. On hearing R2-D2's ensuing flurry of chirps and whistles, the boy smiled in spite of himself. At the head of the loading ramp, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi were engaged in a heated discussion. Wind whipped down the canyons of the city's towering buildings, hiding their words from the boy. Carefully, he edged closer so that he could listen in. "It's not disrespect, Master," Obi-Wan was saying vehemently. "It's the truth." "From your point of view, perhaps." Qui-Gon's face was hard and tight with anger. The younger Jedi's voice dropped a notch. "The boy is dangerous. They all sense it. Why can't you?" "His fate is uncertain, but he is not dangerous," Qui-Gon corrected sharply. "The Council will decide Anakin's future. That should be enough for you." He turned away dismissively. "Now get on board." Obi-Wan wheeled away and stalked up the ramp into the ship. R2-D2 followed, still whistling happily. Qui-Gon turned to Anakin and the boy walked up to him. "Master Qui-Gon?" he said uncomfortably, riddled with doubt and guilt over what was happening. "I don't want to be a problem." Qui-Gon placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You won't be, Annie." He glanced toward the ship, then knelt before the boy. "I'm not allowed to train you, so I want you to watch me instead, and be mindful of what you see. Always remember, your focus determines your reality." He paused, eyes locked on Anakin. "Stay close to me, and you will be safe." The boy nodded his understanding. "Can I ask you something?" The Jedi Master nodded. "What are midichlorians?" Wind whipped at Qui-Gon's long hair, blowing strands of it across his strong face. "Midichlorians are microscopic life forms that reside within the cells of all living things and communicate with the Force." "They live inside of me?" the boy asked. "In your cells." Qui-Gon paused. "We are symbionts with the midichlorians." What?" "Symbionts. Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force. Our midichlorians continually speak to us, Annie, telling us the will of the Force." "They do?" Qui-Gon cocked one eyebrow. "When you learn to quiet your mind, you will hear them speaking to you." Anakin thought about it a moment, then frowned. "I don't understand." Qui-Gon smiled, and his eyes were warm and secretive. "With time and training, Annie, you will." A pair of shuttles eased up to the loading dock, and Queen Amidala, her handmaidens, Captain Panaka, and an escort of officers and guards disembarked. Last off the second shuttle was Jar Jar Binks. Amidala was wearing a purple velvet travel cloak that draped her body in soft folds, and a gold-rimmed cowl that framed her smooth white face like a cameo portrait. Qui-Gon rose and stood waiting beside Anakin as the Queen and her handmaidens approached. "Your Highness," Qui-Gon greeted with a deferential inclination with his head. "It will be our pleasure to continue to serve and protect you." Amidala nodded. "I welcome your help. Senator Palpatine fears the Federation means to destroy me." "I promise you we will not let that happen," the Jedi Master advised solemnly. The Queen turned, and with her handmaidens followed Panaka and the Naboo guards and officers into the transport. Jar Jar hurried over and enveloped Anakin in a huge hug. "We're going home, Annie!" he exclaimed with a grin, and Anakin Skywalker hugged him back. Moments later, they were all aboard, and the sleek transport had lifted off, leaving Coruscant behind. It was night in the Naboo capital city of Theed, the streets empty and silent save for the occasional passing of battle droid patrols and the whisper of the wind. In the Queen's throne room, Nute Gunray and Rune Hako stood attentively before a hologram of Darth Sidious. The hologram filled the space at one end of the room, rising up before them menacingly. The dark-cloaked figure at its center gestured.
"The Queen is on her way to you," the Sith Lord intoned softly. "When she arrives, force her to sign the treaty."
There was a momentary pause as the Neimoidians exchanged worried looks. "Yes, my lord," Nute Gunray agreed reluctantly.
"Viceroy, is the planet secure?"
The dark figure in the hologram shimmered with movement. "Yes, my lord. Gunray was on a firmer ground here. We have taken the last pockets of resistance, consisting of mostly primitive life forms. We are now in complete control." The faceless speaker nodded.
"Good. I will see to it that in the Senate things stay as they are. I am sending Darth Maul to join you. He will deal with the Jedi."
"Yes, my lord." The words were a litany. The hologram and Darth Sidious faded away. The Neimoidians stood where they were, frozen in place.
"A Sith Lord here with us?"
Rune Hako whispered in disbelief, and this time Nute Gunray had nothing to say at all.